I just figured since, I'm kind of new here, I should tell you about myself a little bit. So, I'm from Kansas City, and my wife is from Larned. That's Macy down there. And pretty red with the blonde hair. That's pretty red shirt. That's my wife. So thank you for being here, and she's wonderful. Anyway, clearly I'm just young and just got married, so whatever. I'm happy to be married. Anyway, so I'm from Kansas City, and I have two older brothers. And so we would always like to hang out outdoors and maybe throw a frisbee or go hang out at the creek or in the park and whatnot. And there's actually a park about half a mile down the road. And we just would go there and hang out, we didn't really throw a baseball, but there's baseball fields and we'd hang out. And there's a creek through there that we'd go around and skip rocks on and whatnot. And most people, I think, probably like spring because it's pretty and everything's new, and they like summer because it's hot and you can go to the pool, or you can hop into the creek, or they like fall because of the autumn colors and whatnot, and it's beautiful. But I think Noah and I like winter the best because in the winter we got to see if the creek had frozen over yet, and that way we could go check if we could run on the creek and see if it was safe. And we just love to goof around, and if we fell in, we fell in. But more importantly, my mom always told us before we left, she's like, be careful. And so we were careful. We were always careful not to tell her how cold we were. And we were always careful not to tell her that we had gone on the part of the creek which made a pool that was deeper than either of us. And we were careful not to tell her when we accidentally fell through. We were careful. But maybe you're thinking that's kind of silly, Enoch. Obviously, that's not what she meant by being careful. She wanted you to be careful of where you were putting your trust, of what you were putting your feet in, of what you were trusting to hold up your life, what you were counting on to keep your life steady. And obviously, I'm kind of getting to my point here because in Psalm 1, which I'll be preaching from today if you want to open your Bibles, Psalm 1 is all about where we put our trust. What are you going to count on to keep you afloat, if you will? What you will count on to keep you standing strong even when winds come or waves come or storms come? What are you counting on to keep your life above ground? In this psalm, Psalm chapter 1, there's two pictures. There's a picture of what they call the righteous man, and then there's the wicked man. And it paints two pictures. There's two paths you can go in life. You can't have one and the other. You really have to get one or the other. And so we'll see in the first three verses, the blessed man, the man who walks with God. And then we'll see in the last three verses a picture of the wicked man, the one who turns away and doesn't have like the presence of God with him, doesn't understand what he's missing out on. I just figured that since I preached on Psalm 23 last time, that I should maybe give an introduction to the whole book of Psalms, since Psalm 1 is an introduction into just like the path of wisdom. How are you going to walk? Are you going to walk with God, or are you going to walk in your own ways, in what you think is best, in your own eyes? So that's really where Psalm 1 is going. So as I read this chapter, it's only 6 verses. Just follow along and think about the two different ways here. Starting in verse 1. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. In all that he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so, but are like chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor will sinners be in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. Pardon me. The way of the wicked will perish. So you see the two different ways here. The way of the blessed man, the happy man, if you will, in life, he's the one who refuses to walk in the evil way. And that's the first description we see here in verse 1. It says, he doesn't walk in the counsel of the wicked. Well, let me act it out for you. He doesn't walk in the counsel of the wicked. He doesn't stand in the way of sinners. He doesn't sit in the seat of scoffers. I don't want to read too much into this, but this kind of is a picture, I think, of what sin looks like sometimes in our lives. You kind of like, you walk with sin and you like look at it and you're kind of like flirting with it and you're like, I don't know, maybe. And then you kind of stop and just stand and like, you're getting closer. And then by the time you're sitting, you're stuck in sin. And you're just, I don't know, enveloped. A great example of this, I don't know if you guys have seen Breaking Bad, and I don't know if it's okay for someone preaching at you to have seen Breaking Bad, I don't know. But think about Walter, if you've seen it. He starts out as a chemistry teacher, finds out he has cancer, and then he's like, well, I need to make some money for my family so that they can survive when I'm gone. And so he starts making meth. And that's like when he starts walking with sinners. But then he starts, well, really, he starts like getting involved with the wrong people. And he starts selling it. And he's now standing with the sinners. And by the end of the show, dude is like a hardcore like crime lord, and he's just sitting in his sin. And I think that's what sin is like sometimes. It's not like suddenly we're like totally destroyed by it. It's one step at a time. You walk, and then you get callous, and you stand, and then you sit, and then you're stuck. Yeah. Don't be like Walter. But instead of even walking with sin, I want you to notice what the righteous man does. Look in verse 2. He doesn't even have time to walk with sin. Because all the day, night and day, his delight is in the law of the Lord. He's too busy to get involved with sin because his delight is in the law of the Lord. That's where our delight should be. Now, I think that loving laws sounds ridiculous. I'm kind of, I don't know, I guess I have pride issues and don't like being told what to do and whatnot. But I don't really like the idea of loving laws. Like, that sounds ridiculous to me. So I went on the internet and I Googled like what it meant to the law of the Lord. What does that even mean? Like, God has a bunch of rules. They counted them up. There's like 600 of them. It's like, wow, I don't love that. I can't keep any of them hardly. Like, why should I love that? But there's this I don't know, organization called the Bible Project, and they break some like complicated things down for people like me who don't want to sit and read. So the Bible Project gave this idea that the law of the Lord is not just like rules. It's not like what we think of when we think of the law. It's more like the whole, like, it's the first 5 books of the Bible. The Torah is what that word law means. And so when it says the law, it's referring to those 5 books. And in those 5 books, when you love those 5 books, you can already see like the purpose of God for all of humanity. So that's really what he's talking about. Because the purpose of God, he created mankind in Genesis, and he gave them a purpose to love God and to love people. And then he gave them like the first set of commandments in Exodus, and then he does it again in Deuteronomy. And this is all a picture. And the whole Bible is just a cycle of God redeeming people so they can love God and love others. He makes new people in Genesis, and then he remakes us because of our fallen nature, and he keeps making us new so that we can love God and love others. And I think that's what it means to love the law of the Lord. It's to love his purpose for us, to love his plan for us. The law of the Lord is not just rules. It's loving God and loving others and loving God's plan for us. It's beautiful. I think a good example of someone I know who loves the law of the Lord is a man by the name of Randy Garris. I don't know if you've heard of him. He was a preacher in Joplin for a while. And he actually did our wedding, or premarital counseling, whatever you call it. He did our premarital counseling, and that was super sweet because every time we're with him, like, I feel like wisdom just oozes out of him. Like, like sometimes when people have been walking with God long enough, that just wisdom just comes out of them. And this man, Randy, and his wife, are just like that. And wisdom comes out of their lives because they've been delighting in the law of the Lord and in the story of God for us. Like, his wisdom and encouragement to our lives was just inspiring. And I want to be a better husband because of this man. And I want to know God better because of this man. And I guess I'm probably even partially preaching here because of this man encouraging me and helping me through the harder times in my life. Like, when you delight in the law of the Lord, it makes a difference. It changes how you live your life. It changes you from, skating around on the ice and falling on your face through the ice to, well, maybe you'll slip and fall, but this ice, well, it's not going to break. And that's what we see in verse 3. Not ice, but the real imagery of this chapter. We see that the righteous person is like a tree. Okay, cool. It's trees. We know about trees. What do trees need? Well, they probably need sun, and they need water, and they need ground to be in. So I'm just focusing on the ground and the water here, because the roots have to have something to dig into. If you've ever been to a creek, you know that on the side, there might be trees leaning over because half of the roots are trying to find something to dig into and they can't. And so they're just leaning over. But God is not like that. He's solid ground. He's living water, and he nourishes us and enables us to be strong in the winds of life. I mean, hard stuff's going to happen no matter what. This is not like, oh, perfect life, goody, no hard things ever. That's not what the blessed man is. That's not what blessed even means. It just means that with God, you can survive those things. You won't die from those things. You won't be blown away by those winds. You won't fall over and lose your faith. With God, when you delight in something stronger, when your feet are, I don't know if this counts as a root, but if your feet are like standing, this is not disrespectful, I promise. When your feet are like standing on the Bible, that's when you have something that can support you. Amen. That's when you have something that can keep you going, something that will keep you strong. The law of the Lord and delight in it is what we should dig our roots into. He is our living water, and he is the one who nourishes us. I like how in the last part of this verse 3 it says, this tree yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. I think that's encouraging. I think that's really encouraging because we go through those hard times, and yet the hard times are part of what get us to the fruit in the end. The fruit in the end are a result of going through the hard times with God, and he takes us through them, and he brings us out on the other side, and we have not fallen over, we have not withered, we have not died, we still have our bark, but we are stronger even through those winds because of where our roots are. Amen. That hard ground, the good ground with water running through it. That is what it means to be a tree, to delight in God's purpose for us. Unfortunately, not everybody has that root system. Not everybody is strong. And that's where we see the other picture here in the last half of the chapter, this psalm. The wicked, in verse 4, the wicked are not so. They are like chaff that the wind just drives away. They will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. Amen. This is kind of scary, honestly. It's like judgment, gloom and doom, hellfire, all that jazz. This is This is serious. Like when you don't have something to hold you steady, to keep you firm, to hold you down, you can just get blown away.
That's right.
I'm sure everybody knows what chaff is, but I googled it just to make sure. And it's like the stuff that you get off of the seeds. It's not even useful. Like not only does it not connect to the ground or have any water or have any roots, it doesn't even have like a seed to even like get there in the future. It's just useless. It's meant to be thrown away and burned, and there's no point to chaff. They blow around and it doesn't go anywhere or it gets burned up. There's no future for chaff. I don't know, this chapter doesn't seem to illustrate exactly what the wicked do, more like what they don't do. And it feels like the wicked here are just the ones. It's hard to stay rooted if you're not rooted in the right thing, I think is what I got out of this. Like if you're not rooted in the law of the Lord, you're just going to get blown around. And I think sometimes this is more subtle than we expect. I think I have a friend who they believe in God, or they did, but I think that the wind of life, the wind of all this social media wokeness pressure, the wind of, oh, I want to be tolerant, and the wind of everybody telling them you're wrong and I'm right, this is why, and you hate me if you say I'm wrong, I think that got to them. And they want to love people, but I think they lost their roots in the process. And I think it wasn't such a choice to be wicked, in the words of this psalm. I think it was more of like, if you're not careful, you'll end up without your root system if you're not fighting to keep that strong. If you're not fighting, you might get blown away, like this chaff here. There's hard things in life. Y'all know that? I mean, that's obvious. I mean, everybody knows there's hard things. There's war right now. There's tragedies. There's riots. Again, more riots. Nobody likes riots, but are we going to get blown away by that? Are we going to survive that? Are we going to bend but not break? Or are we going to say, I'm throwing in the towel? Are we going to say, well, I guess I must have been wrong? It doesn't mean that you're wrong just because you're going through hard things. Everybody goes through hard things. There are winds in life trying to push you over. There are people lying who think they're telling you the truth. There are hard things, and there are relationships that are going to be hurt, and you're going to be hurt, and life is not easy. That's why we need to choose where we have our roots.
Amen.
If our roots are in God and in His Word, in His law, which is all about loving God and loving others, that's when we can be strong. That's when we can withstand even those hard things, even those times when we're like, life is just the worst. Even those times we can withstand when we are trusting in the law of God. When we are planted by streams of water, as it says in the Psalms. Like, Jesus said, I am the living water. And I think that was mentioned in Sunday school this morning. We talked about the living water a little bit. God is the living water. And when we're planted by Him, when His Spirit's moving in us, when we're delighting in His law, we can bear that Holy Spirit, the fruits of the Spirit that He talks about. The fruits of the Spirit come when we're planted by that living water. God is good enough to give us His Spirit, and it's incredible. And He's given us our vitamins. I don't know what you will. He's given us everything we need to be a strong tree for Him, to be living a life that delights in Him, that delights in His purpose for us. As I close, I want to tell you a story about woman who I believe is a perfect example of bending but not breaking, of being planted by streams of living water, and that giving her the power to not only survive, but to begin to thrive in Jesus. Last summer, I had the chance to go to the Middle East, which was an incredible opportunity. It was like a missions trip. And I got to go there and meet a woman, and we'll call her Mary. I'm not supposed to say her real name. So Mary is a refugee, right? And she was forcibly removed from her home country of Syria, and she doesn't even know if her husband's alive. And I didn't really understand how that was possibly her story, because the woman I knew was the sweetest lady ever. She was so hospitable to us. She invited us all over to her home multiple times, and she cooked like a bunch of food for us. She made everything that she had basically in the kitchen and had very little money left after she had given everything to us. We couldn't even eat everything she had before us, and she had like no money left. And that kind of generosity and that kind of sweet lady and the big hugs and the big smiles and just everything you can communicate with someone even when you don't know their language, that didn't line up with her story of having to raise 2 kids in a country where people don't want her and they don't want her to be there. Her home country doesn't really want her back, and she doesn't really have a way to make money because people won't hire her. And yet, this woman I met, she was thankful for her life. She felt like she was just the most blessed person ever because she had God. Because a couple of years before I got there, I was only there for 2 months, so it was like, whatever. Sorry. The missionaries there had introduced her to Jesus. They had planted her by a stream of water. They had told her who God was. And so even though everything in life is just blowing at her, doesn't have her husband, doesn't have money, doesn't have emotional support, doesn't have anybody around her, excuse me, gracious, doesn't have anybody around her, she was standing strong, and she was bending, but she wasn't breaking. She was bending, but she was not breaking, because she delighted in the law of the Lord. She trusted in God. She believed that God's way was the way. I really like how it says the tree will yield its fruit in its season. Because this lady, Mary, she got baptized while we were there, which was like the first baptism they had the whole time, which is incredible. She was baptized, and she started having women come over to her house. And she would minister to them and disciple them. And this is like a refugee lady who doesn't like fit in and doesn't know anybody and doesn't have anything that we think matters. And she was just thriving because she was planted by a stream of water, a living water, the only stream that we need. And she was delighting in God's purpose for her. In God's purpose for her, she was delighting in the law of loving God and loving others. So my question for you today is, where are your roots? Are you trusting in God? Or are you getting blown around by the world?